Hi everyone. Thanks for tuning in today's session on the topic function as a service for the vSphere admin. My name is Robert Guske, and I'm a technical account manager working for VMware's professional service organization. And with me today is my well-appreciated colleague and friend Michael Gasch.
Hey everyone. Hey Robert. Yes, I'm Michael Gasch. I'm an application platform architect at VMware in the office of the CTO, and my role today in this presentation is to help out Robert with the functions piece in the demo.
All right. Before we start, I have to show you the disclaimer, because Michael and I will not going to talk about or demo anything related to ongoing projects or upcoming features. We just want to share our excitement with you and thought that this topic is worth to record a video of it. And so let's get in. Okay, treating containers as first-class citizen in vSphere is what vSphere integrated containers can offer to IT teams through instantiating the container image as a virtual machine. And running containers as a virtual machines means that IT ops teams still have the ability to treat them like classical workload before. And therefore, you don't have to build out a separate tailored infrastructure stack and can continue to leverage existing scalability, security, and monitoring capabilities. This is why I built a dashboard in vRealize Operations Manager to monitor those virtual container resource pools, as well as container virtual machines in terms of utilization and performance. The dashboard, to get the appropriate values of each individual resource pool displayed, you have to select those over the object list here on the left side. Deciding to use this object list for the dashboard and to create a dynamic custom group for a dynamic assignment of the resource pools based on the membership criteria. So I decided to use vSphere tags as a membership criteria, but assigning a vSphere tag is still a manual task in vSphere. So how do we get rid of this? And Michael knows how.
Okay, awesome. Yes, so instead of going manually, like having Robert do those manual steps and tagging resource pools and then letting them be picked up by vROPS, what we thought was using a event-driven approach where we would capture vCenter events, for example, resource pool created, which a vSphere integrated container host is essentially. It's just a resource pool, and capture this event, this created event, and trigger a function which then assigns a tag in vCenter on this resource pool automatically without any human intervention or Robert doing anything. And then, as Robert already told you about vROPS, it will be automatically picked up in the next polling cycle. So this is based on a very early and alpha stage work that Alex Ellis, the founder of OpenFaaS, and I have been working on, and it's called the vCenter connector. So the vCenter connector itself is a connection point to vCenter, which retrieves the events from vCenter, for example, VM created event, VM powered on event, resource pool created event, alerts, etc., and will then forward these to functions which have an interest in those events. So that means that you could write a function which just listens, for example, to VM powered on events, or in our case, to resource pool created events. So this is what we're going to do a demo today. So this means we would have to set up, first of all, OpenFaaS, which is a function as a service framework, which allows easy to write functions and deploy functions and work in an event-driven way. And we'll then deploy the vCenter connector. We'll deploy a Python demo application, but essentially you could write it in any language, because the beauty of OpenFaaS is that whatever you can put in a Docker container, you can basically write and come up with your own logic. Some people might prefer PowerCLI, other people like me prefer Go or Python, so that's just up to you. And in our case, we use Python for the tagging example. And to deploy OpenFaaS, we're going to leverage Kubernetes, so this is going to be shown in the next slides. So what we have, and this is just a high-level conceptual overview of all the pieces and components interacting with each other. So on the left side, you see vCenter, This is obviously where our VMs, resource pools, etc. are being deployed. And then we have a VMware PKS cluster, which is a Kubernetes environment based on VMware PKS. Inside PKS, in this Kubernetes cluster, we have two namespaces. One namespace for OpenFaaS, where we'll deploy the OpenFaaS components, as well as the vCenter connector. The vCenter connector itself talks to the OpenFaaS gateway to retrieve a list of functions which are interested in a specific event. So this way we know which function to trigger, and so we don't trigger always all the functions if just one event comes into the vCenter connector. So we know which functions to trigger based on which event, and this is done in the function itself, and we're going to explain that later. So then in the OpenFaaS function namespace, this is where the functions will be deployed, and our function is called pytagfn, which is basically the Python function doing the tagging. And then we have the resource pool, which Robert will create at the end, just to show that how things work when Robert kicks off a vSphere integrated containers deployment, which will create a resource pool, and that will do the automatic tagging. So the way it works, as already discussed, is we are listening for the event stream from vCenter. So we are basically getting any event emitted by vCenter. And we'll use this event, in our case, the resource pool created event, to invoke the functions being subscribed to this specific event. And this is our pytag function. Pytag function then will be triggered and connect to vCenter, apply a tag to the resource pool. And based on vROPS polling interval, which is 5 minutes, vROPS then in the next cycle would pick up this new resource pool because it has this tag assigned that Robert was talking about this dynamic membership criteria. So this is the flow, the overall flow that we're going to show. And right now, I think we're ready to jump into the demo. Okay. So essentially, we kind of model the flow here that I'm responsible for setting up OpenFaaS and deploying the function, whereas Robert is kind of the vSphere integrated containers and vROPS administrator. So he's just doing his part, so we have a separation of concerns here. The first thing that we need to do is to set up OpenFaaS. So in my terminal here on the upper level, you see basically the commands that I'm going to send to this PKS cluster, and in the lower level, you see all the pods being and containers being created. The first thing that we have to do is to create the namespaces for OpenFaaS, as you've seen. This will create 2 namespaces. It's a little bit slow here because I'm running over a remote connection to Robert's lab, which is some kilometers away. And then the next thing is, now that we have the namespaces, we're going to deploy the Kubernetes components for OpenFaaS. Now the beauty is it's based on FaaSnetis. FaaSnetis is basically the OpenFaaS on Kubernetes edition, if you will. And you can find it on github.com openfaas/FaaSnetis. And now it's really easy. We have created the namespaces, and now we'll just fire up the YAML folder, which contains all the components needed for OpenFaaS. So that just takes a sec to create all the stuff. And it's really easy. Basically now we're already up and running with OpenFaaS. We have our functions as a service framework ready. Okay, so the next piece is to set up our vCenter connector, the one that listens to vCenter events and then also connects to the gateway. We see that our pods are running for OpenFaaS, so we're ready to go into the connector. And you can see here in the lower, there's the tabs where I'm switching through. Let me first show you the YAML file for this Kubernetes deployment. So this is a regular Kubernetes deployment for the vCenter connector. Right now, it's based on an image that I have created in my Docker repository. The reason for that is that we have an APR, pending PR on the vCenter connector to allow multiple different event types, and this has not been merged yet, meaning that I'm running my custom image here. When the PR will be merged, obviously you will get OpenFaaS public builds for this. So you have to trust on me right now that I'm not going to abuse the trust with this image here. And then we have, you pass some arguments to the connector. First argument is where the vCenter is located. So this is my IP here. Then you pass username and password. Obviously, passing passwords, plain text to the file is not a good idea. So we are working on the next kind of fix for the connector to use secrets, Kubernetes secrets, inject them. So this is on our list, prior list to fix. Right now, we still have to pass them here, so bear with me. Again, this is not production code, not production ready. So it's for you to use and play and then give us feedback, and so we can improve. Obviously, security is on our top list. The insecure flag there is if you have an untrusted certificate from vCenter, we're kind of ignoring it. Otherwise, the connector will not connect and say like it's an untrusted certificate. And the last one is the gateway. This is the other kind of pipe for the connector where the gateway is located. Since we're going to deploy the vCenter connector in Kubernetes in the same namespace with OpenFaaS, we can use Kubernetes DNS name resolution, which just points to gateway.openFaaS and then the port. Before I'm going to fire this up, let me show you the GitHub repository where you can get that. So the vCenter connector itself lives in the OpenFaaS incubator organization. And I have opened this kind of pending PR that the code is based on that we're going to run here with the Docker image. You can read through it. It has the README updates, etc. It's already in there. We hope to have it merged pretty soon. Okay, let me fire this up. It's just this. Takes a sec to connect. All right, so let's jump back and see whether things are deployed. So container, the vCenter connector is running. That looks good. And what we can do now, let's just see the logs. OpenFaaS deploy vCenter connector. Oops, logs deploy this. This is the way it goes. And so we can already see that we are receiving events from vCenter here. And this syncing topic map also means that we are successfully connected to the OpenFaaS gateway, and we are retrieving constantly, like every 10 seconds, retrieving a list of functions.
We saw on the diagram, right?
Yes. So this is basically an empty list right now, or an empty map, because we have not yet created the function. Okay. So the function is the next piece. So this is what we've shown here, the connector and OpenFaaS. Obviously, this is what you just do once when you deploy this environment. Functions is where the beauty comes in. This is what you write and then provide to OpenFaaS. Now, we're going to show this Python tagging function here, but again, you could write it in PowerCLI. Actually, we encourage you to write it in PowerCLI because we need some more examples. So I've written 2 examples, one in Python, one in Go. So, but we want to grow the community, and PowerCLI seems to be a pretty important language in the vSphere community. So whoever wants to give it a shot, you can look into the repository for the Python function just to get a glimpse of how things work. So this is the code here is for Python. We have a stack file which describes where this function is being deployed, some environment variables, I'm going to show you in a sec. And then here in PyTech FN, this is the code that retrieves events or gets triggered and then uses this JSON stream that's coming in and connects to vCenter. We're not going to look at it right now because it's out of scope for this presentation, but if you want to check and see what the code does, just give it a go there. Okay, so the Python function has a stack file, and the stack file describes, as I said, where this function will be deployed. So you give it a gateway, and here it's localhost, which would not work out of the box because I'm not running OpenFaaS on my localhost machine, but it's running in vROPS lab. So I have to set up a port forwarding, which allows me to port forward localhost to vROPS lab. That's a neat trick to get into like pods running in a remote connection. And then you give it some environment variables. Those are needed for the function to connect to vCenter because we want to do tagging. And so we need an account that is privileged to do tagging. So username, password. Again, this is something we're working on. We're going to use OpenFaaS secrets in the next version of this function. So you don't have to specify passwords in plain text here. But right now, you still have to put it in plain text. So just keep that in mind. The tag URN, this is important because the function doesn't know which tag to assign. The only information it gets from this event stream from the connector is it's a JSON with the managed object reference that should be tagged. Managed object reference is nothing else but an ID that identifies an object in vCenter. It could could be a resource pool, could be event, whatever. In our case, since we are just interested in resource pool events, we would get a resource pool object. But we still need to know which tag to assign. Now the tagging in vCenter works like from an API perspective, does not use names like human readable names, if you will. It uses this kind of URN which uniquely identifies tag in a vCenter environment. Now where do you get this tag from? So we want to assign the virtual container host tag, but how do you retrieve the URN? There's multiple ways to do that. You can use the API, you can use PowerCLI, or you can use VC, which is a nice binary and tool that my colleague Doug has created, where you can connect and interact with vCenter from the command line. If you don't know VC, let me just open it up here in GitHub. It's a really nice tool, not just to do tagging. You can do basically anything. You can do create clusters, configure clusters, etc. It's very useful, but it also has this way to retrieve tags. And so we're going to use VC to retrieve this tag ID. In our case, we already have it here, but I'm going to show you how to retrieve it in a command line in case you don't know that. And then we have a tag action. So obviously tags can be attached and detached. So in our case, we want to attach this kind of virtual container host tag to the incoming JSON object, or manage object reference to be precise. And then our function needs to express which events it's interested in. And so this is the topic that we're going to call it. And in our case, we are interested in resource pool created events. How do you get this name? How do you know what the name is? In the PR that I've shown on GitHub, there's a README. And this README contains all the information, how you retrieve the names, and then how you do like this documentation for event types. And when the PR is moved, obviously it will be directly on the front page of this GitHub repository. But right now, since the PR is not merged to README, we have to look up the README in this PR. So let's deploy this function. Again, as I said, since it's localhost, I need to do a port forwarding. So let's port forward localhost to Robert's lab. Just give it a sec to connect. Oops, I need to set the context probably to my cluster. Am I still connected? Let me see. Yes, the connection is still there. Context is PPS cluster. So let's try it again. And Robert, what did I forget? The OpenFaaS namespace. So it should come up with handling connection. This, okay, so now we're ready to deploy our function. This is done with the FaaS CLI, it's OpenFaaS CLI tool, fast deploy. Still not listening? Oh, it's 8080. Is the gateway, hold on a sec, is it 8080 or 8000? Let me check that. So, services. Right now we are into troubleshooting mode, which is not a bad thing because I'm sure you run into trouble as well, so you can see that. It's 8080.
Oh, okay.
Yes, so the port forward was wrong. It was an 8000 instead of 8080. Just give me a sec. This is what happens when you use your history and pick up the wrong command. So, awesome, it worked. So it was just basically I specified the wrong port for the port forwarding. Instead of 8080, I specified 8000, which obviously was wrong. So now we have the function deployed. Let's look in the in our Kubernetes environment. So you see that there is in the namespace OpenFaaS FN, we have our function being deployed. Everything is handled by OpenFaaS. So this is kind of behind the scenes. And the function is deployed. I think before I hand it over to Robert, last thing I wanted to show is how to retrieve the tag URN for this function stack file. And then I'm going to hand it over to Robert, who will create a resource pool, and hopefully, if everything goes well, we'll invoke the function, and then we have our tag assigned. So govc, again, is a binary command line tool that you can use to interact with vCenter, and it has a tags ls function, which basically just lists tags. And we see that we have 2 tags in our environment, and then we can do info, tags info, and then just give it the name of the tag. and it will give you back an ID, and this is the URL that you would use for your function.
Michael?
Yes?
Did you install GoVC locally, or is it running in a container?
So I created, this is running locally as a binary, which you can get from the GoVC GitHub page. I also have a Docker container built for GoVC. This is also in the README for the vCenter connector. So everything is described how to get it. If you don't want to install GoVC, you can use a container that I built for it. But whatever you prefer, or use PowerCLI.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yes, and in my case here, it's running like it's a binary and not running in a container. Okie dokie, this is it. So just to briefly recap, we installed OpenFaaS, we installed the vCenter connector, we installed our function, and I've shown that how to retrieve the tag URL that we need for our function. Now I'm going to go stop share and hand it over back to Robert.
All right. What we are seeing here is in the middle section, we see the deployed function, which Michael deployed. And at the bottom, I will execute in kubectl and logs of the Python function so that we see when I will deploy a virtual container, so a resource pool, that the function get executed. So the function is waiting for a resource pool. And here you can see I will make use of our big machine utility, which will create virtual containers for us with specific parameters I've defined before. All right. So there it is. So we will wait after the big machine utility creates the virtual container host. So because this whole virtual container host thing is built up on more parts than just a resource pool, because we need a Docker API VM to communicate with the Docker API. And we can see that the function was already invoked. So successfully attached tag on resource group 1846. So I will switch to our vSphere client. We can see here that our virtual container host, FaaS demo, is already deployed and up and running. And we see that the tag virtual container host is successfully assigned. So, and what Michael mentioned as he went over to the through the diagram is that we have to wait until vRealize Operations Manager pulls all new information and metrics from the vCenter server. And after around about roughly 5 minutes, our new deployed virtual container host got assigned to the dynamic custom group and will join the dashboard. Welcome back. And as you can see here on the left side, vRealize Operations Manager picked up our resource pool, and now we have the ability to select it and get an overview in terms of performance as well as utilization. And this concludes our demo. So let's recap what we've demoed. So we have Kubernetes up and running based on VMware VIC. Michael deployed OpenFaaS in the namespace OpenFaaS, of course, as well as the vCenter connector and the tag function written in Python. So the vCenter connector is listening to the events coming from the vCenter server, and the tagging function will get invoked when the specific event gets executed, and the tag function will assign a virtual container host or a vSphere tag called virtual container host, and this resource pool will join the dynamic custom group in vRealize Operations Manager and is available for monitoring. So thanks everyone. I hope you enjoyed this session. Thanks a lot, Michael, for this great work. And
all right, thank you.
Maybe see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.